how can I land a PMO manager stroke lead role? I know we've kind of like touched a little bit on that, but how can I land a PMO manager stroke lead role? Very open question.
Apply for one.
Apply for one.
Is the start. But I think this and one of the things that we find, particularly in the House of PMO Essentials Managers course, is that there's an expectation that when we get up to being a manager, that we're still going to continue on doing all of this work that we did as an analyst, but we're just going to be better at it and kind of be the lead at it. And I think actually what we want to be when we get to that manager role is recognise that actually there's some more interesting things to do, I think, at the PMO manager role, and demonstrating that actually what you start caring about as a PMO manager, and actually start becoming accountable for, is understanding how your PMO adds value to the organization, your favorite word, value. So it's about making sure that actually as a PMO manager, you know, you're not going to necessarily just continue doing the same thing for the next 5 or 10 years, but you're understanding the metrics of how, you know, kind of what makes a PMO successful and what makes a PMO successful in your organization. And to me, that's the real kind of step change when we're moving up to a PMO manager role. So I think when we're trying to kind of land that, it's being able to kind of look at perhaps the PMO you're in, if you're sitting there as a PMO analyst role, and thinking about, well, why do we do the services we do? What difference is it making to the organization, to the project or program, and being able to articulate that? So you can kind of do that in your current role, but as a manager, PMO manager, you're going to start being accountable for that. So I've been able to demonstrate that thinking, I think, is a key part of moving to that role.
Okay, what's the difference between a PMO manager and a PMO lead?
Oh, interesting. So the PMO manager role tends to be in an organization where they have a PMO and it's defined as a part of the organization structure. So if you looked at the organization structure and it had departments, and it would have a department that said PMO, and you've got a group of people working in the PMO, a PMO lead typically is going to be where you've got a number of people who report into perhaps the head of delivery, but they don't necessarily see it as a PMO department. There's a lot of PMO activities that just need to be undertaken. Often, a PMO lead is just a single person, what we would affectionately call a POO, yes? A project or a PMO of one, where actually they're kind of thinking about having a PMO and they're kind of putting a lead in place to start looking at what those activities might be, and perhaps thinking about who else in the organization is currently doing bits of that role. So a PMO lead is, in my head, is in an organization where it's less established than where you would have a PMO manager.
There's also grading and pay structures that mean there's a difference there, in that we can't call you a manager. However, you're doing a lot of the management role, but we can only give you that title.
Yeah.
I think I've also come across PMO lead having no managerial responsibility or line management responsibility. So that might be the other reason why it's called a PMO lead rather than manager.
So essentially, you might have a project management lead, project manager, or delivery manager, who have all of the project managers reporting into them, and you also, or the PMO lead, reports into that kind of delivery manager, and you're doing PMO stuff, but you're not necessarily classed as a manager.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a minefield.
It is, but to me, the kind of the real step up from an analyst to a manager is that recognition of why we're doing what we do and how it adds value, which then also kind of leads on to the question of recognizing when things have stopped adding value and being able to kind of prioritize what are the things we should be doing in that PMO.
Yeah.
It's very easy just to kind of keep on going. And again, did a piece of work not so long ago. We had we did an in-house course on PMO services to an organization. They said, "Oh, Eileen, come and just do a little bit of help with us to do some coaching on kind of our service catalogue." And it was really interesting because when they looked at what they had as what they were there to do, and then their services, there was a complete mismatch.
Right.
But they wanted to kind of keep doing all of the things they were currently doing. And it was a case of, well, actually, if you've been set up to do something different, you actually need to look wider than what you're currently doing and say, what is it you need to do to be deemed successful? Because otherwise the people are going to come in 6-12 months time and say, we set you up to do this, but you've been busy doing other things that perhaps haven't added the value or have led the PMO in the way that the organisation wanted them to.
Yeah. I think just coming back to that question then about how do you land a PMO manager stroke lead role, I think one of the biggest questions we get is that gap between analyst and manager, and what, you know, if you're currently sitting there as a PMO analyst but do want to think about moving up that kind of next level, what can you do about that gap? Because it can feel massive between
Well,
those two
there
roles.
is a classic, you know, in terms of that's exactly what the House of PMO Essentials managers role course is about. That says actually this will tell you and give you an understanding about what the manager's role is about and how you kind of do that step change. So you're still going to use some of the competencies you've used in your analyst role, but it's that kind of step change and helping you understand how you manage the services rather than just do the services.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other qualification, isn't a P3O, that foundation that anybody could do that. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you're analyst, manager, whatever, but it's the PMO, sorry, P3O practitioner that tends to be the manager doing that. So that could be something to consider, is doing the second part of P3O if you've done the first one.
And I think that the you know, kind of the difference that the P3O is really based on kind of how do I design a PMO and do, you know, kind of make it the right thing for the organization. The House of PMO Essentials is what are the skills and competencies I need and how I'm going to use them in that role. So kind of attacking that role from two different ends.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing, of course, is that I think we've done a session on this. I can't remember where or what it was called, but there's a bit in there about there are things you can be doing in the job itself. Yeah. So if you look at training and development, they have this thing called 70-20-10, which is 70% of your development comes on the job. 20 is from other means. That could be, you know, you're doing reading on the subject, or you go to a conference or watching a webinar or whatever. And the 10% is the kind of formal qualifications, which is what we talked about. The 70%, a big chunk of it, actually, you could start thinking about, how do I get myself ready for that kind of role? What constitutes the 70% of things that I can be thinking of right now? And we've got, you know, there's things like,
you know, that you know, if we think about that's the conversation you have with your line manager and say, during the next 6-12 months, I'd really like to get some experience in this. And again, one of those things, I'm just going back to kind of my value, is about saying, well, actually, we're going to be introducing a new risk management process. We're going to be introducing an issue escalation process. Can I take a lead on that? Because part of what you're thinking in when you're doing that service is, why am I doing that service? Who am I doing that service for? Who are the customers? Which is the type of thinking you're going to need across all of the services when you become a manager.
Yeah.
So it's about thinking, and again, the competency framework is great for thinking, well, actually, you know, looking at the job, the role profile for a manager, I've got risk management skills and I can support projects and programs. Actually, now I'm going to have to think about introducing that service. What are the centre of excellence activities and the competencies and the manager
a competency framework is, in essence, if you don't want, you know, not 100% sure what they are, is it allows you to do an assessment based on what you're doing right now, what the core competencies that you'd see in PMO. You can do a self-assessment against those, which will give you an idea then about potentially where you might have some gaps. Because when you do a self-assessment, it's not just about doing it, this is me today. It's set up in such a way so you can do a comparison against any of the roles. And there's 4 levels: there's admin, manager, admin, analyst, manager, and director. So in theory, if you're wanting to land that PMO manager role and you're currently an analyst, you could do a self-assessment based on your current analyst role, but at a click of a button, it will show you where your gaps are against that manager one. So straight
Yeah.
away gives you an opportunity to talk to a line manager in the performance review and development plans. Actually, I'm looking at my self-assessment and it's showing me some of these gaps. Can we have a conversation about it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know, but remember, it's the 70% of where our professional development comes from, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. You know, it's pairing with other people, having a job buddy, it's pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. Like Eileen has just said, taking on an initiative is one. Mentoring or helping somebody else is a learning experience that could give you an edge on how what's my management style going to be. So if I'm going to be a PMO manager and never managed people before in my life, I have actually no clue about what my management style might be. So today you can start mentoring somebody else in the group, for example, to give you an idea of, oh, well, actually, I'm quite good at this, you know, so it's an interesting one.